Right. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you, Joy, for joining me. And we've just been having a chat already. You were covering so much ground that I was like, stop, let me record this because we really need this to share with our members and any other viewers that are going to be able to watch this later. So Joy, for anybody that's now watching, Joy is going to be a speaker at our launch summit that's happening on the 15th and 16th of January. So 10 days from now it kicks off, which we're very excited about. And Joy, your subject specialism, although you have a degree in environmental sciences and research around that, you've really honed in on the dangers of fluoride, and you are at the moment campaigning against the plans that the government has to nationalise fluoridation of the water supplies across the board and really take local authority and or the rights and the ability to contest that away from localised sort of areas. Is that accurate to describe?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. We're really concerned it's going to be rolled out across the whole of England. According to the previous Secretary of Health, Matt Hancock, in March, he confirmed that the intention was to roll it out throughout England.
It is incredibly worrying, and you've just raised some points for me around where we've had this notion that if we can raise enough awareness, it's going to force some sort of public consultation and bring it to people's attention. You've just been describing to me where that in and of itself is nowhere near enough to protect us rights and to protect us health as far as what the plans are for the fluoridation. So I wanted to backtrack a little bit and go back over that because I want to share that with people because I think it is really insightful. So right now it's the bill's going through, and the petition that we have needs to reach 100,000 signatures to force a debate about this in the House of Commons. Is that correct?
Correct, and it's up to 38,000. So we are a little behind, and it's a case of everybody pushing now to find out as many people as they can to sign and share the petition.
Yeah, and the deadline for that is the end of March. Is
correct?
That 2022, right? So we definitely do need to get word out to as many people as possible about that. That will force the debate. Now, can you just explain, as you did just before now, to me about the consultation, where they're talking about doing a public consultation about the fluoridation in the water? What are the problems with that? What are the issues that we face?
Well, first of all, it's really bad that one person, a neighbour, can say, yes, I want fluoride in my drinking water, and his neighbour says, no, I don't. And the one who says he doesn't may end up with having it in their drinking water, which would be basically against their human rights, because we're all allowed to give or refuse consent once we've been told all about the issue. Well, the person who says, yes, I want it, may not know enough about it. And the person who says, I don't want it, may know everything there is to know about it. But the one who wants it is going to be the person who's going to be listened to, because that is what the government wants. They are so biased in favour of adding this poison into our drinking water. That's the main thing. But then, of course, you've got a problem of many people who do not have access to computers. For example, if they're in protected homes, but they have their own minds to make up, or if they're old and they haven't got computers, or if they don't have enough money to buy a computer, or they don't have enough money to buy a modern mobile phone even, they are not able to access all the information they need to access. And not everybody's going to be going to libraries these days because they don't want to congregate indoors because of COVID being around. So many people are going to be disenfranchised. The other thing is, each area should be asked about it, not just the whole country, but it looks as though the proposal, judging by a particular lord in the House of Lords, he's saying that everybody should be in one public consultation. Now, I live down south and somebody lives up north, and they've got their own particular problems regarding their dental health and dental decay. They don't want anybody else down south saying, you must have this in your drinking water, especially since it's probably a different water company. It's so one-sided, so biased. And even if you know, and you say in the public consultation, I do not want this because of A, B, C, and D, and here are my references, you still may not be listened to because of the bias of the government, who'll say, well, thanks very much for that, but we've made up our minds and we're going to do it anyway. And that's what happened in Southampton, where 72% of the people who took part in that one public consultation, the only one we've ever had, 72% said, no, we do not want to have this stuff in our drinking water. You'd have thought that had been the best thing of all, but no, because they're not allowed to assume that it's a simple head count. It has to be your cogent arguments, and if your cogent arguments accord with the government, or in this case, the Strategic Health Authority, then they're going to decide in favor of your wishes. So it's just not a level playing field. And as far as we can see, it looks as though the goalposts are being removed further apart by this amendment in the House of Lords saying we would like to have it for the whole country, just one public consultation. The amendment hasn't gone through. They haven't decided, haven't even started talking about it yet, but we can see the writing on the wall.
Yeah, and you always see that what they're intending to kind of pursue. So are you saying if there were enough people providing informed objections, then that could maybe turn the tide a little bit with this, where yes, it's going to force a debate, but through public opinion and actions that we can take, not just signing the petition, but one thing I really liked on a previous interview that you did, you talked about non-compliance in paying your water rates, or, you know, for whatever it's classed as when you're on a meter. That being another action that you can take to really drive home the point that what you're supplying me with is actually, it's medicated, it's medicine, it's not drinking water. Therefore, the whatever contract your class is having as a citizen, you know, using those utilities no longer applies to that because you haven't given consent to have medicated water. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. All right. So we look at this. It's a simple thing of I am paying for my water, drinking water. I expect to get drinking water, but it's not drinking water because it's a medicine. And as a medicinal water, it does not come under the provisions of the Drinking Water Directive, which has been retained by the UK post-Brexit. So they're giving us medicinal water. I'm not protected by the provisions of the Drinking Water Directive. So the guidelines, the actual standards, maximum standards for every substance in that water does not apply to medicinal water. So if I fall ill from drinking something like, let's say arsenic, too much arsenic, I'm not protected. But if there's arsenic in drinking water, they keep it to a certain level.
Right.
So that's the first most important thing to think of. It is medicine. I have the right because it is a product substitution, which is illegal because nobody asked me if I wanted to have a different substance. When I first started paying my water charges back in whatever that was, I wasn't fluoridated. I wasn't, so I was getting drinking water. And no one then told me it was going to be substituted for medicinal water. So it's illegal. So I have a right to say to the courts, pay. I'm not going to pay for this. I shouldn't. And another way, of course, is to stop paying for your water. I pay for my sewerage, but not for my drinking water, because the drinking water contains arsenic and lead, fluoride and hydrofluoric acid, which have been deliberately added to the drinking water. I don't see why I should have something which has been adulterated when I'm expecting to get pure water. And I've got the proof that it's a medicine, it's medicinal function, and I've got proof that they're adding arsenic and lead and hydrofluoric acid and some other heavy metals and some radionuclides as well, because of the processes through which the acid goes when it's produced in the Negev desert in Israel. And it comes over here and sold to the water companies. Yeah. All these horrible, nasty, tiny amounts of all these heavy metals, etc., are in the drinking water.
Yeah.
Why should I pay for that?
Yeah. And I'm sure I probably don't need to emphasize this for people, but from my perspective, the water that's in our system, as in what we're ingesting, is very much part of the foundation of our health, our well-being. And my passion and the subjects that I teach around are human energetics. So I always look at it as that water, the consistency of that that's a conduit for all signals in the body, anything that we're thinking, feeling, any actions we want to take, you know, what's informing that is the coherence of the signals that are running through a system.
Mhm.
So if you have interferences with that, you're not going to be functioning optimally in a range of ways. That affects us in a range of ways, you know, mentally, emotionally, physically, and over a long period of time. If you're ingesting what is essentially dangerous substances, of course it's going to have a knock-on effect. You're going to develop all sorts of conditions from it. So I know you're going to talk about that in a lot more detail in terms of the links. You've done a lot of study into what the links are between certain types of conditions and the content, the volume of fluoride or the other substances that you've just mentioned that's in the water. That's going to be in your presentation, is that correct? You're going to be talking more about how we can measure that having that in the water is affecting anything and everything from intelligence to our emotional well-being as nervous systems and that sort of stuff. Is that correct?
I can touch on that, but I don't go into detail because that gets into realms of, oh my gosh, that's huge science. And for this sort of summit, I suspect that's probably not appropriate. We know the different types of illnesses caused by fluoride, but it's not exactly a direct cause of their illnesses. It's more like a knock-on effect. For example, we know that fluoride damages enzyme production. It damages the production of energy in the cells. That doesn't actually directly cause an illness, but it will eventually, of course, because of the buildup of the toxins in our bodies. And the only way you can achieve real health is to eliminate all those toxins and stop putting them in. It's a simple message. I can't really go into too much detail really in 45
on
minutes.
that side of it. Okay, so it's not going into details about the health issues more so than the impact that this is having on our rights. Yeah, and from a sovereignty perspective, which again, I'm coming at it from a psychological and energetic perspective, right? So to me, sovereignty is not feeling disempowered that you do not have the right to choose what you want to choose for your life, providing you're not causing harm to anyone.
Correct.
You
And the
should
thing
be
about,
able to choose for yourself. And that's an empowered feeling when you know that not only that is how it should be, but that is the case. You're in a completely different state from that perspective to what you are when you might disagree with things, but you're in that mode of, but what can I do about it? I have to go along with this. That's very disempowering.
Helplessness is horrible. It destroys everybody's futures, and we can do something about this. Even if a law is passed, we can still say, I'm not going to drink this water. Why should I pay for it? Because just because one law was passed to say yes, it's going to happen, it doesn't. That law doesn't take any notice of any other laws in different arms of the legislation. For example, I've talked about product substitution, and it's not looking at our human rights. I mean, there's no point having a Nuremberg Code which forbids experimentation on humans without their informed consent. If 15 years later, or in fact in England it was 1955 when it did the demonstration trials in Andover. That 7 years after the Nuremberg Code was passed, they were starting to experiment on people in Andover and 3 other places in England to see if they would tolerate fluoride in their drinking water. That is absolutely abysmal for a government to do that. I mean, how could they forget that they'd just gone through a Second World War 7 years earlier? And that is the problem. There's just it's just indolence by the politicians and sometimes the corporate powers, like, for example, Colgate-Palmolive. They just want to have their own way. They want to make money, and they don't give a damn about our rights and our health. In fact, in some cases, we think that pharmaceutical companies want to make us ill so they can sell more pharmaceuticals. I don't think that's a secret these days. I think everyone's
I believe most people would agree.
I don't want to feel helpless. This is one of the reasons why I have this vocation. I can't stop what I'm doing because I will not kowtow to these blighters who want to put something injurious into my body without my permission. So there you go. I don't drink the water. I filter it out. In fact, we double filter it. We've got our reverse osmosis. When the filters start failing a little, we stick it through a distiller. And then I add bicarb to make it a little bit more interesting. And that's what I drink. And I'm particularly healthy. And I live in this goddamn awful fluoridated West Midlands. I don't think many people are like me. I do not take any pharmaceutical drugs whatsoever. And I'm not going to tell you my age. But I haven't, for the last 20 years, I haven't been to see my doctor. I refuse to have all these vaccinations and things for, what's the last one they tried to have? Oh yes, a lung test to see if my lungs were functioning well. I think they are. I don't need, and they wanted to give me something to counteract shingles. It's only 30% successful. So why would I want that? What I do is I add good things into my body so I don't come down with all these things.
Yeah, and it's stripping it back to the basics, back to the foundation of health. Is there any sort of closing words in terms of what you would want people to know they're going to get out of your session from the summit?
I really do hope they go away and they are heartened to know that there are certain things they can do to kick back against this really bad intervention and this very strange idea that Sajid Javid has about improving the nation's health by adding a poison to their drinking water.
Yeah, and I've just got to ask this final question. Are there any benefits at all from fluoride being in our water?
It's a bacterial side. As it passes through the mouth, it perhaps a little bit sticks to the plaque in our teeth, just a little, and that might possibly deactivate the bad bacteria, but it also deactivates the good bacteria, which are also in our mouths. So I think possibly, nah,